Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 is a short first-person mascot puzzle horror game that I recently beat for the 6th or 7th time, with my first jab at the game being not too long after it released, and I recently picked it up again after not touching it for maybe a year, and it appeared to have received some update that made my mouse show up on screen sometimes while playing. All I can say if that happens is sorry. Alright, that out of the way, I said this game is short, and short it is, taking me maybe 2.5 hours on my first attempt, but then I would later speedrun it in about 8.5 minutes. It's very interesting in that once you've got everything down pat, you can really fly through it if you want to. A lot of the game is just solving puzzles and finding items, with the Huggy Wuggy vent chase probably being the hardest part of this chapter, as it's the only point in the game in which you're under a time crunch. Everything else is at your own pace. Now that being said, this game does not hold your hand with things like objective markers, and you really have to pay attention to your surroundings if you want to progress. I remember on my first playthrough, I probably spent a good 15 to 20 minutes going absolute bonkers trying to figure out the color code to the first door you need to open, before I finally caved and went to the old Google in search of answers. In this case, if you notice the toy train in another room, you'd see it has 4 different color cars, which was the code. Like, please be honest, how many of us actually figured that out by ourselves? It was just such a random thing that if you weren't paying a lot of attention, like me, you probably wouldn't have figured it out. Or, like the aforementioned Huggy vent chase, when Huggy starts to chase you, you have to duck into a little vent in that room, which is closed when you first enter said area, and it took me an easy 15 to 20 tries before I noticed it opening up, so definitely a game that requires some attention. Who is Huggy, by the way? I don't know all the lore myself, but he's a toy sold by Playtime Co, and there's a giant statue of him in their toy factory that you're exploring, and he doubles as a nighttime security measure to deal with intruders, and was foreshadowed at the start of the game when you play a security VHS tape.
In child care, we also pride ourselves on our security. For example, this facility is full of hidden motion triggers, which, once set off, will turn on the factory's emergency alarms and directly contact the authorities. And that's one of the more tame aspects of our security system. No spoilers.
On the topic of audio tapes, several are scattered around the game, which are all optional, but add little bits of lore to the story and really help spark curiosity into what happens next. I believe there were 5 scattered around this chapter, with TVs being near the tapes for you to play them in, with the final tape probably being the most interesting, where a doctor seems to be talking about Huggy and how dangerous he is before seemingly being killed by Huggy right as he's finishing recording.
We must forge onwards in the name of science, whether those who are beneath us understand it or not. End of...
Okay, changing back to gameplay, you have arms, which you can use to grab faraway items, pull stuff towards you, or use them to conduct electricity for puzzles. And maybe it's just me, but it seems that in an update they now graphically look better and more detailed versus when I last played this title. I'm not really sure if there's a lot more left to discuss gameplay-wise, but if my memory serves me right, you used to have to hold the sprint button to run, but now you just tap it to toggle running on or off. A nice addition, I guess, but it took me a second to catch on to this. Alrighty, now for a story rundown, which I've brushed on a couple times. Again, I'm no lore expert, but the game starts with a Playtime Co commercial for their living doll, Poppy Playtime, which goes a little wonky at the end and shows some sort of a creepy hallway, and then you're shown a letter sent to your character, which states, "Everyone thinks the staff disappeared 10 years ago. We're still here. Find the flower," leading the player to assume your character used to work there, and he goes to the now shut down factory in search of answers. Does this remind anyone else of Bendy and the Ink Machine? Along the way, he bumps into a giant statue of Huggy Wuggy, and he has to grab a key off of Huggy to enter a locked room, and after finishing up business in said room, he backtracks to where the statue was, and it's now gone. And an observant gamer will notice a couple little Huggy jump scares in the following areas. Anyways, your character makes his way to a toy room, where Huggy confronts him and your character must escape this Sesame Street crack dealer and kill him by dropping a large box on Huggy's head. From here, the player will realize that they're in the area shown in the opening cutscene, and after navigating some bridges, you find a Poppy doll locked in a display case. So naturally, you open the case, the screen goes black, and you hear,
"You opened my case,"
before the credits roll, preparing you for Chapter 2, which should come out sometime later. And I reckon that wraps up most of this title. The horror elements were largely creepy environments, suspense, and eerie music. And I'd say this is probably a medium scary game, not something like Jawbreaker or Dead Space that could give an elderly person a heart attack, but also not something like Atari's Haunted House, which is rated E10. Poppy Playtime Chapter 1 falls somewhere in the middle. Graphically, especially for a free game, it looks great, although I will comment that an older version of the game had more customizable graphic options than now, if my memory serves me right. The voice actors are good. It overall runs well, except for that random mouse issue I commented about. One thing I will say though, is that the PC version could use some controller support. I overlooked it earlier because it was a smaller game, but now that it's blown up in popularity and has received console ports, I definitely like to be able to use a controller instead of keyboard and mouse. But yeah, Poppy Playtime Chapter 1. If you like horror games, it is free on Steam and well worth checking out. I give it a 9 out of 10 by my grade scale. Some similar games I could suggest to this title would be Bendy and the Ink Machine, or Made of Skur, if you want something M-rated, both of which are first-person puzzle horror games. And that is everything from me for today, yo. I hope someone enjoyed, and I will likely be reviewing Chapter 2 sometime in the near future. Anyways, thanks for watching. For any newcomers here, I mostly play, review, and discuss zombie and horror games, so maybe go check out some of my other content if that sounds interesting to you. Again, thanks for watching. Hope everyone has a great day. Always remember that Jesus loves you all very much. Peace.
And it's weird, because adults are just kids, but older. I don't think anyone ever really feels like an adult, but your body just gets older and older, and then you die.